We begin this morning with Virginia's Governor Ralph Northam refusing to resign. No governor of that state has failed to finish out their term, going all the way back to the Civil War. That could change today. I have a great team here to break all of it down, but first, while a lot of us spent the weekend focused on the Super Bowl, this story was blowing up. Virginia's Democratic Governor Ralph Northam had been sailing along with approval ratings nearing 60% when this photo came out Friday. As you've probably seen, it shows two unidentified people, one in blackface and one in a KKK robe. On Northam's medical school yearbook page, what was it doing there, even if that wasn't him in the picture? The public backlash was fast, and it was intense, and immediately put the governor's future in serious doubt. By Friday evening, Northam had apologized and issued a statement admitting he was one of the people in the picture, but he wouldn't say he would resign. On Saturday, though, the governor reversed himself, saying it was not him in the photo, but he said he had dressed up in blackface for a dance contest in 1984. But he still said he would not resign. Then came Sunday.
He needs to resign immediately to stop the pain in Virginia and, frankly, around the nation.
He needs to understand that he no longer has the moral authority to lead as governor.
He's lost the authority to lead. He's lost the authority to govern. He has to resign.
We have to move on. You cannot be the moral leader. It doesn't matter whether he was in the photo or not in the photo at this point. We have to close that chapter.
As of right now, both Virginia senators, the state attorney general, every Democratic House member, the chairman of the DNC, and essentially all of the party's biggest current and former presidential candidates have called on Governor Northam to resign. Remember, all of these people, Democrats, members of his own party. Late Sunday, the governor called an urgent, unscheduled meeting with his senior staff to discuss what to do next. But according to the Washington Post, people familiar with the meeting said the governor had not made a decision. I want to bring in NBC's Geoff Bennett, who has been talking to lawmakers and residents in Richmond, Virginia. Jeff, what are they telling you there?
Hey, Steph, we spent much of yesterday on Richmond's South Side talking to people, some of whom are lifelong Virginia residents, all of whom have a stake in the community. And here's the thing, we're as Democratic politicians, Democratic officials, are resolute in calling for Northam to step down and step down now. For his constituents, it's not quite as clear-cut. These people are saying that Ralph Northam is a good governor who should be judged by the man he is today, by the policies he embraces today, not by what he did or didn't do 35 years ago. And they're making the case that if he's telling the truth, if he's not one of those two men in that racist photo, if he really doesn't know how that photo ended up on his yearbook page, then we should extend to him some measure of grace. Take a look.
If he is not in those photos, then I think he deserves a second chance. He's been great for Virginia. He's stood up to the General Assembly, thank goodness, and has really worked hard for our state.
I don't like this idea of, this person doesn't deserve a second chance. It seems to be that, at least from my perspective, Ralph is a decent guy, and whatever person he was 35 years ago doesn't seem to be that person today. Yeah. So, I don't want people to treat me that way, and so I'm not going to treat him that way.
But when you add to this the realm of politics, it becomes completely untenable, not just for Democrats, but for Ralph Northam himself. Nationally, this has emerged as a real test for the 2020 presidential hopefuls. All of those Democrats now who are lockstep in saying that Ralph Northam should resign because it's a test of how they will handle racial tensions. And then locally, there's a thought that Northam could cost Democrats here. You have crucial state elections coming up. All 140 legislative seats are up for grabs. And I talked with a state senator, Eloise Lucas, about all of this. Here's what she told me. If he doesn't resign, should he be forced out?
I don't know how you do that. I'm not going to go that far because I think he'll do the right thing before it gets to that point.
So you think ultimately he will step aside and let Justin Fairfax take it?
Well, I'm hoping that that's the case because his noise is not going to stop until he does.
So here's the deal. There is no modern precedent in Virginia for impeaching a governor. So this really is Ralph Northam's decision to make. I'm told that, yes, he convened that urgent meeting last night with top aides and administration officials of color, but that he emerged from that meeting having not changed his mind. So he has a cabinet meeting scheduled today. The House behind me will convene later this morning. The governor says he's going to stay put as long as he feels he can effectively govern. But, Steph, he might find out within the next hour or two just how effective he might be.
My goodness, Jeff, thank you. I want to bring my panel in. Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com. He also went to college in Virginia and knows Virginia politics well. My friend Midwin Charles, an attorney with the law firm Midwin Charles & Associates, also a contributor at Essence Magazine, and Mike Pesca, host of Slate's daily podcast. All right, Jason, I got to start with you. Is there any way the governor can ride this thing out?
Stephanie, I don't think so. He has absolutely no credibility with anyone. And I think it's important to remember, after looking at that last report, people say, well, you know, if it's not him, I forgive him. You have to remember, Governor Northam said, I was in the picture Friday, and then basically the next day he tried to get America to believe that his yearbook was hacked essentially 30 years ago, and that somehow that picture wasn't him. So regardless of people want to be forgiving, from a political perspective, people don't trust him. They don't think he's credible. I had a long conversation with Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax on Saturday. He has expressed extreme disappointment, very similar to a lot of other Democrats in the state. And what they're concerned about is that Northam and this scandal will prevent them from pushing through the kinds of policies that they've all been running on. And at the end of the day, a lot of Democrats are like, look, take one for the team. Your explanations haven't worked, and you're hurting the party in an election year.
Midwin, by most accounts, in the last year, before this happened, the governor was quite popular. He worked hard to expand Medicaid. He's added $1 billion to the state revenue. He landed the Amazon second and a half headquarters, I guess you could call it, in Virginia. Does any of that matter? Will any of that be taken into account when deciding his fate? Because those are things he did. The question now is, who is he as a person?
You know, I think that those are the things he did. And to add to that list is, you know, he was successful against Ed Gillespie, who ran a very racist campaign. But I think those are the things that he did. Going forward, he has to have people behind him in order to do more. And as Jason Johnson just said, he no longer has the credibility. So how is it possible for him to lead? How is it possible for him to push forward his ideas if people no longer trust him? He sailed into that office, into that position on the backs of African Americans, and he has now betrayed them. It's become abundantly clear. He needs to go.
Has he lost the authority to lead, Michael?
I think so, but if you look at the report that was just put forward, it seems like a lot of Virginians want him there. And I'll just give voice to the other side of the argument, because no one nationally is doing it. And by the way, the politics of it are clear. It's hurting the Democratic Party. Either you're the party that countenances this or you're not. It's a calculation a lot like the Al Franken party, since the other party allows a Steve King to operate within their midst. I totally understand why every Democrat would want him gone. But he was popularly elected, and I haven't seen a poll yet. And to force him out at the word of national Democrats, if the people of Virginia don't like it, there is some consideration, I think, to be given to the will of the actual voters. That's what the democracy is based on. Just as a consideration, because you hear no voices essentially saying, let him stay, except the actual people he's serving, the Virginians who were quoted in that report.
Okay, Jason, do you believe if this happened 4 years ago, before the election of Donald Trump, would the reaction have been the same?
I think it would have been the same, but I think that the swiftness with which people would say, look, this is not tenable would have been different. Let's bear in mind, that was a report of a couple of people. The politicians right now, and the Democratic politicians in Virginia right now who are saying, look, Ralph Northam needs to go, they're listening to their constituents too. This is not about elite, national Democrats. This is about people in the state who are going to local diners, going to local public schools, talking to their voters, and these people are saying, hey, look, I can't trust this guy. He lied. He tried to moonwalk on Saturday instead of taking responsibility for what he did. So I think we need to understand that this is a reflection of popular will being manifested in what politicians are saying, because Virginia has changed. And one last thing I'll say, because I think this is really, really important. This also has to do with the fact that, I've said this before, Northam is Drew Bledsoe and Justin Fairfax, Lieutenant Governor, is Tom Brady. There are lots of people in the state of Virginia who actually really like Justin Fairfax, who see him as the future of the party anyway, and you're going to to see, as his popularity rises and as it becomes abundantly clear that Northam can't keep his job, you're going to see knives come out. This is going to get really ugly. But we got to be honest. This is the will of the people, and people no longer want to tolerate this kind of behavior, especially when the governor can't explain himself.
Then let's stay in Virginia. The Richmond Times-Dispatch wrote an editorial calling for Northam to resign, and I want to share a bit of what they wrote. We all act foolishly in our youth, but a college graduate studying to be a physician in a state with Virginia's troubled racial history should know better than to reduce that history to a callous joke. The photograph reveals a lack of adult judgment that is disturbing. Midwin, how much of a role does Virginia's own history play in this? And again, a Ku Klux Klan hood is not a Halloween costume.
It plays a huge role, and I think that what a lot of people tend to gloss over in this discussion is that photograph is painful. That photograph mocks the pain and suffering of African Americans, and mocking the pain and suffering of African Americans of slavery, Jim Crow segregation, is a form of racism. And I think what's important to recognize here is this is a man who was in medical school, and we are now at the precipice of a crisis in the African American community, with black mothers 4 times more likely to die after giving birth. The infant mortality rate amongst black babies is far higher. African Americans already do not trust the medical profession. We know with the history with the Tuskegee experiment and a variety of ways in which African Americans were poked and prodded and treated as just specimens for medical advancement. So to have someone who practiced as a physician, the first thing I thought when I saw this photograph is, how many black patients did he have? And how did he approach their care? Because if you think something like this is so trivial, that tells me that you don't respect black people. Now, I don't care if you are overtly racist or if you are racist behind closed doors. You're still racist. You're still racist.
Michael, what if the governor brought this up himself? What if he raised this issue a while ago on his own and said, I need to be clear. Here's something I did when I was younger. I made a huge mistake.
I was thinking about that because there's all this talk of forgiveness, but forgiveness is always asked after you got your hand caught in the cookie jar. How about someone being proactive without his hand being forced? It would be interesting. I think our political culture would say, what are you doing? This is an own goal. You're causing problems by yourself. But maybe, and then there'll be rumors, oh, you were just bringing this up because it was going to be surfaced anyway. But that, to me, and by the way, you can be forgiven and also not be governor at the same time. Like, forgiveness doesn't have to mean you retain your seat. That would be impressive to me were that to happen. I think there is a set of circumstances where I don't know if he could have explained this, but he certainly could have said it was 35 years ago. It was wrong. I'm going to exactly tell you why it was wrong, saying some of the things you said. And now I do ask your forgiveness, but he didn't do it right. And that, I think, just adds a bigger pall on this whole thing. This is why he has no support from anyone except, and I would like to see a poll of Virginians rather than anecdotal evidence about who says what.
Could he have brought this up himself?
I don't know, but I think that's the point. And you make a very good point. Everyone wants to talk about forgiveness, but forgiveness is earned. And what he did when he had that press conference was say, you know what, I'm not working hard enough for your forgiveness. That's essentially what that was.
Jason, could he have raised this himself? I don't know, let's say after Charlottesville.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say he raises after Charlottesville and says, you know what, this terrorist attack here has got me to examine my entire life. We don't have to dig too far into this to realize how incredibly problematic this is, right? It's not just a matter of I did a silly joke. He said, basically admitting that I've done blackface several times. Next, you look at that photo itself. I got to be honest with you guys. I'm from Virginia. I was alive at that particular point. You can't just get a Klan costume at Party City, okay? Somebody was obviously friends with a domestic terrorist organization. So whether he was the guy in the Klan costume or he was the guy in blackface, he was perfectly comfortable with that behavior. That is something that everybody in this state should be concerned with. And the reality is this, and this isn't just political, it's practical, it's policy. You can look at Hillary Clinton, who said, super predator in 1996, but she's like, look at all these things I've done in the last 25 years. If Ralph Northam had a credible record with civil rights, if Ralph Northam had a credible record with these kinds of issues so he could point to, I made this mistake then, but look at all I've done now, he wouldn't be in this situation. He doesn't have that record. That's why he's in trouble. That's why he's got a magical black friend that he says that he finally learned these things from in 2017. That is unacceptable in American politics, and it never should have been.
My goodness. Well, we're going to see what's going to happen today. Thank you all. Important conversation. Coming up.